This Black History Month, join us in celebrating Black resistance, past, present, and future. Pick up a copy of our Black History Month journal. Get inspired by our posters of Black icons at library locations across the borough, and browse our book lists, all ages programs, and much more at queenslib.org/BHM 2023. What's your favorite thing to do at the library? Get creative and show us by submitting a photo to our 6th annual Share Your Love for Queens Public Library contest from February 1st through February 28th. Learn more at queenslib.org/librarylovers2023. Tax season is here. Queens Public Library is partnering with a number of organizations to offer free in-person tax counseling sessions at several QPL locations. Visit our blog at queenslibrary.org for more information.
Welcome to Queens Public Library's Talk with actor Linus Roache, star of such films and TV shows as My Policeman, Priest, Mandy, Vikings, Homeland, and Law & Order. The Los Angeles Times says of My Policeman is an absorbing, resonant, deeply wistful adaptation of the 2012 novel by Bethan Roberts. Entertainment Weekly says of Mandy, it's the kind of extreme movie-going experience made for midnight movie cult worship. Variety says of Vikings, Roache is especially good in the role of King Egbert. The series is bold and brawny. Hi, I'm Brian Alessandro. I have written for Interview Magazine, Newsday, Penk, Huffington Post, Lambda Literary, and I've recently adapted Edmund White's A Boy's Own Story into a graphic novel for Top Shelf Productions. Additionally, I co-edited Fever Spores, the queer reclamation of William S. Burroughs, an anthology of essays and interviews about Burroughs for Rebel Satori Press. I'm also the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the literary journal The New Engagement. My first novel, The Unmentionable Mon, was published in 2015 by Cairn Press. My first feature film, Afghan Hound, was produced by Marriott Media in 2011. It is currently streaming on Plex, Tubi, and Amazon. My new novel, Performer Non Grata, will be released in April by Rebel Satori Press. Culture Connection, curated by Daniel Zaleski, and now in its 10th year at Queens Public Library, is proud to present international artists from emerging talent to award-winning masters. These disciplines include music, theater, author talks, and film. Now expanding to a virtual format, Culture Connection is currently reaching a global audience. Linus Roache began acting in 1975 at age 11 in the British pop soap opera Coronation Street. He has starred in television shows, films, and plays such as Priest, The Wings of the Dove, The Glass Menagerie, Richard III, Pandemonium, The Chronicles of Riddick, Batman Begins, Vikings, Homeland, Law & Order, Mandy, and My Policeman. In 2003, he was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for his portrayal of Robert F. Kennedy in the FX film RFK. Linus, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's my great pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you just returned from India. You were on an Ayurvedic Panchakarma cleanse. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
You did, yes.
Okay.
And I won't probably try to tell everybody what that actually is, because I think it would take the whole night and I still wouldn't be able to communicate it. But yes, it's something my wife and I have wanted to do for a very long time. We've been to India many, many times in the past, but some friends of ours have done this Panchakarma cleanse, and Ayurveda is probably one of the oldest forms of medicine on the planet. And the idea is basically just to get you the whole of the body and the being in balance through use of herbs and oils. And so it was a pretty intensive 3 weeks, I have to tell you. And we lost a lot of weight and came out of there being told that the healing has just begun. So really 3 weeks is not enough. It goes on for the next 3 months.
And you're only home for a week, 2 weeks? I mean, this is very recent.
9 days ago, yeah.
9 days ago. Wow. I spent, I think I was telling you, 3 months in India in 2008, and it was really life changing for me. I didn't want to leave. I tried to get a job there. In fact, I came back kicking and screaming. It's a gorgeous country and a beautiful culture.
It's an
So,
amazing country. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
so you actually started, as I said at the top of the program when I was reading your bio, you started acting as a child at age 11 on Coronation Street. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a theater brat. I was born into it. Both my parents were actors, and
Mhm.
I kind of actually pushed against it for a little while because there was a lot of pressure on me at school to always be in the plays and perform because of my parents. So I was actually sort of pushing it back. But the opportunity came up to be in my dad's show, which when he started, by the way, for those of you who don't know, because the show does not run in the US. My father is in the Guinness Book of World Records for being in the longest running television drama. He is the only surviving character from the first episode to the present day. And that is
Wow.
62 years he's played that
Wow.
role. He
Wow.
is now
Incredible.
91 and he's still doing it. But yeah, so when his character came to the age of having children, he had actually had children, the idea came up, well, let's give the character some kids. And to begin with, my mother was very anti me being a child actor. So I
Mhm.
didn't go in the show. And then at one point, I did a little bit of a guest spot. And then they came up with this idea to write a story for me and my dad. And it was just so much fun. And I was
That's great.
not aware that I was performing for a lot of people. I was just having fun with my dad. Play acting, and it was just wonderful, and it was a great introduction, if you like, to
That's
acting.
beautiful. I have a lot of friends I have a lot of friends and acquaintances in England, and they were all very excited when they heard that you were going to be on because Coronation Street is a very big deal in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit
It's
about it?
well, I mean, it's huge. It's not just a big deal.
Mhm.
It's like the staple diet of everybody's day. It's on
Wow.
5 shows a week now.
Wow.
When it
Wow.
started, it was actually, in a way, it was very cutting edge television because in the early 60s, it was probably one of the first times that drama had gone into working class people's lives in Northern England. It was a very gritty, realistic show about real life. And over the years, it became what is now called a soap, and it's kind of huge in its scope and its scale. And I think they've got upward of about 60 main characters going. They have got their own studio. They've got their own
My
units
gosh.
running. So
It's a institution, really. It's just
it's a total institution, and my dad is an institution. He's a national
yes,
icon. In
that's
fact, he
great.
just got
And
an OBE. He just got his honors.
congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic. That's wonderful. Congratulations to him. Tell us about these photos that we're looking at, Linus.
Well, I think, this is, gosh, it brings me back. Just so
Mhm.
your audience know, these photos, Brian got them because I did a cruise Q&A and I had a little slideshow. So I said, do you want it? He said, yeah, let's have it. So this is where these come from. That's my beloved mum who passed in 2007, and she was an actress as well, but very different from my father. She was into, the cutting edge, nitty gritty drama and theater. And my dad just by default sort of found himself in the most popular show,
Hmm.
became the most popular show in the UK and still is. And that top picture was actually done for a magazine called Ideal Home. And I remember the shoot, actually. I still remember them coming to the house and getting us to play with that crazy foam. And that's my sister there as well. And those were
Okay.
happy days before my parents got divorced.
Hmm.
And that picture there is me on the set of Coronation Street before I played my dad's son. I did a little
Okay.
get thing, but that's him in character on the set, and me, I don't know what age I'll be there, like 7 or something.
7 years before you made your big debut. And we have another
Yeah.
image, these three here.
Well, it won't mean a lot to your listeners and watchers today, but some of those characters there are like, they were British icons through the 60s and 70s, just like extraordinary actors and characters in this show about working class, life in the north of England. And the story for this little sequence was that my father's wife, his character's wife, had died, and the children had been sent to live with their aunt somewhere up in Scotland, and I'd run away. I'd run away from Scotland to be with my dad. So we had this little self-contained story. And it went so well that they invited me to stay in the show. They wanted me to join the show as a regular at the age of 10. And that
Wow.
caused a big family debate.
Oh my gosh.
Of which the decision was, you've got the rest of your life to be an actor. Go back to school. Let's not worry about this. So we
Sure.
didn't take it, and they recast the role with somebody else.
And do you regret it?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay.
No,
Okay.
I think the thing is, it's very interesting because I really love and respect what my father's done. It's quite unusual. It's extraordinary. And
Yeah.
he's so graceful and gracious at what he does and how he sustained his passion and interest. But I knew very early on, I wanted to do multiple projects. I wanted to do theater. I wanted to do classics. I wanted to do modern theater. I wanted to do film. I wanted to do television. I did not want to get stuck in doing any one thing. It was almost a response, I suppose, to the career that he had. So I knew I didn't want to be defined. They came back to me when I left drama school at the age of 18. Oh, no, sorry, 21, and invited me to play the same role and join. I had to sign like a 6-year contract, and so I didn't do it. Yeah.
Well, let's see. My Policeman.
Oh,
This is your most recent film.
No,
Yeah, we're jumping around a little bit. We're coming. we just rocketed into the future, and we're going to then go back and forth a bit because this is really a retrospective.
Okay.
So, tell us about this film. When we spoke, you and I, a couple of months ago, I guess it was, you said that you had gotten very strong reactions to the film, very moving reactions to the film from audience members. Tell us a little bit about some of those emotional reactions to it. First of all, before we even start, let's tell the audience what it's about. I mean, for those viewers who haven't yet seen it, My Policeman, in the film My Policeman, you play the adult version of Harry Styles, pop sensation Harry Styles' younger character, who was a policeman in the 1950s. And he happens to be gay, and he has an affair with another man. He's an art curator, I guess, Linus.
I mean, the thing is, you jump to saying he's gay. I think the dilemma of the story is he doesn't know he's gay, and he can't quite deal with the fact that he's gay, and he's sort of stuck in the social mores of the 1950s, and he's trying to live a conventional life, and he meets this young school teacher, Marion, and he's all set to live a very conventional life. But when he meets this very interesting, colorful, slightly older man called Patrick, who's this museum creator, I think it awakens this real passion and this real love in him for who he really is. And without giving the story away, the decisions and the choices that get made in the 1950s, we see play out over a 40-year period into the 1990s. And we see the fallout of what happened in the 50s 40 years later. So it's a story of heartbreak, of love, of loss, and maybe some redemption over that time. But the moving responses, I think, have been from just generally, we did a lot of Q&As when we were doing the press, and you just realize that the film created a lot of talking points about, having the courage to love who you want to love, being grateful for the fact that even though there's always progress to be made, we don't live in the 1950s and 60s where it was illegal to be gay, and, maybe some gratitude for growth. And the film, does have a little bit of hope at the end that maybe however much time has passed, you can still find that love again. So it touched a lot of people, and it was great to have those conversations. The only one story, a friend of mine who's a director friend, she went to see it in LA. It wasn't a big screening, hardly anybody there, but there was this young couple sitting in front of her, two women, and at the end of it, they were just both in floods of tears, and they hugged and kissed each other, obviously a couple. And I think that just is very moving to think that, it's very validating that the movie says, let's not be prejudiced about this. Let's find the courage to love who we want to love. And the film really speaks to that, and with a bold voice. And I'm very proud to be part of it. Yeah.
I think I wrote you the night that I watched it and told you that my husband and I were watching it in tears. And I thanked you for that, for providing that sort of moving experience for us. But particularly for people of a certain era who were not able to look. Don't get me wrong. There is still certain corners of the world today where being gay is dangerous and forbidding. But I think generally in many circles, it has become easier to come out and be who you are. But for those people who look back on a time when it wasn't, it's especially personal and moving.
Exactly. It really is. It's a cautionary tale, a reminder that we don't want to go back to those times, to be grateful for progress, that thank God there's been some evolution. And as you say, there's still a long way to go. But
there is.
I think, and I think it's also what gives the film its weight. I mean, you could just have the story in the 1950s, and that would be moving in itself. What happens between these three people is very powerful. But I think it's the weight of 4 decades.
Yes.
And somebody who gets frozen in time and can't live his true heart and his passion and get the opportunity 4 decades later to be reunited with something. That's what gives it a sort of feeling of a whole lifetime, which gives it a sort of depth and a weight to the piece, I think.
Absolutely. And kind of almost painful to watch you in those scenes with Rupert Everett, who plays the older version of the young man who you had the affair with when you were younger. It's the chemistry is beautiful and the observation is beautiful, and having him sort of sit there silently with you kind of trying to avoid him is especially aching. So I think that gives it an incredible amount of gravity. Do you think your character Tom is tormented by his past and his decisions? Would you say he is castigating himself to atone for this past behavior on some level?
Yes, I mean, the answer is yes, but his castigation is really, he's just denying he's gone into complete lockdown, freeze out the past, don't mention it, don't talk about it, don't think about it, let's not even confront it. It's like the extreme denial. Right. So that is a form of castigation because you're denying yourself, but it's not like he's constantly thinking about it and tormenting himself. He's really has. And this is what I focused on, a man who's just put it all behind him. And when the film starts, the Patrick character is coming back into his life. So we don't really get to see Tom as he was in the 40 years, but I spent a lot of time writing my own backstory for what his life was like, what his daily routine was like. And
that brings me directly to my next question, which was, how did you prepare for this role? So you actually did some journaling as the character?
I mean, I use different things for different projects and different characters, but for this, I mean, Beth and Roberts have written a beautiful book, so that's the first place to go. And then Michael Grandage, who directed this piece, is somebody I know, and he's a theater man, so he very much encouraged conversation and collaboration between us as an ensemble and a cast. And obviously I did research on the time and the period, and then watch films like Victim with Dirk Bogart and things like that. And when it comes to it, I mean, I did write a little bit about what his life was like. And I mean, for people who have seen it, they might be interested to know that there's a whole lot of sequences from the movie that were cut that did actually show Tom's sexual engagement in the 1990s. And we had scenes of him cruising and Marion confronting him and him sort of saying, don't talk to me about this. But when it came to the edit, I talked to Michael, and I think he realized that it took away from the love story by doing that. If this had been a 6-part television series, maybe we could have gone into that, but they needed to keep it connected within the love story. So they took that out. So really, in the movie, you don't know anything about what's happened in the 40 years.
I think that works well, that sort of insular focused approach to these three people over the course of 40 years. So we've been talking a bit about My Policeman. Let's take a minute to look at the trailer for the film.
To all of us. To all of us. Cheers. Cheers.
Come with me, my love, to the sea.
I want you to be my wife.
Sea of love. I want to tell you how much I love
this love is all-consuming. I pity people who don't know what it feels like to be this in love. Come with me, just you and I.
He's trying to destroy our marriage.
No hiding, no lies.
You know nothing about being married to... Stop telling me what I'm supposed to think about it.
Down with me, my love, to the sea above.
He was always in your life, in our lives.
I want to tell you how much I love you.
It's really a beautiful film, Linus, and you're also wonderful in it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have to ask this because my niece will kill me if I don't. Did you get to meet Harry at all?
Actually, I did get to spend quite a bit of time with
Okay.
Harry because, well, a few things. We had to do a few sequences where we were using the same shot that my character would walk through, and then they were going to fade, and sort of do time lapse between the two. We also had a bit of rehearsal time where, because it really, Michael's a great director because he's, as I said, he's got a theatre background, but he encouraged us all. So we were together in London and sometimes on Zoom because of COVID, but we would talk a lot between the two age groups as well and share information and ideas about things. And then actually, it's again cut from the movie, but there's a whole sequence where one of Tom's passions is swimming. So we did this whole sequence swimming in the ocean in the English Channel, and it was really, really cold. And Harry and I both had to do that. So we spent a day together freezing
in the
our
English
nuts
Channel. Oh my gosh.
And they had divers out there and boats and all this safety stuff and all that.
And they never used it. And they didn't use it in the
used
film. Oh no. Well, maybe we'll get a director's cut at some point.
I doubt it. It was Harry and I. It was our bond, I think, doing that because we both got around.
That's funny, and it's really smart, I think, of Grandage to do that. And I wonder if other filmmakers do when actors are sharing a character during different periods.
Yeah.
Do they often put them together so that they could start to share nuances or tics? Or I think that makes a lot of sense.
It does, and then also conversely, Michael did something quite brilliant as well because he released us from the curse of having to try and imitate our counterparts because he said, look, any of us 40 years on from our younger selves, we are not the same people.
We change, right? Good point.
And that's why you could have cast this with the same actor and aged them up, or tried to find someone a little older and age them down and age them up. You could have had one actor go through. But we are different people later on. And in a way, it works for this film that it is just two different takes. And he freed us from having to imitate or mimic the other. But also saying that, they shot in sequence all the younger story first. So when myself and Gina and Rupert arrived, we were able to look at their footage and just pick up on a couple of little hints of intonations and things like that. So
very clever. Speaking of incredible performances in the cast, you and the cast won a Toronto International Film Festival Tribute Award for the film. Is that right? Yeah. What was that like?
It was lovely. Yeah, it was. We won the best ensemble in a movie, which I think was a great credit to Michael and how he made us all part of this one world. Because often in a movie, it's so broken up into pieces, you can end up all being in different movies sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it was a real tribute and a great honor. And we all made a bit of a shambles of our speeches on the night, I think, because we didn't quite know where we were going. But it was lovely. It was a great thing to.
Well, congratulations! It was very well
got it.
deserved.
There it is.
Oh, how fantastic! Well, congratulations. It was earned and
good
much
doorstep.
deserved. Yeah,
It's a good doorstep.
it's very modest of you. Shifting gears again to TV land now, from film land to TV land. You portrayed, of course, very famously, DA Michael Cutter on NBC's Law and Order for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Is that right? From 2008 to
I did
2010.
three seasons. Yeah.
3 seasons. It was around that
Yeah.
time, though, 2008 to 2010ish.
I started in 2007. Yeah, and went through to 2010. Yeah.
And Eve, if you could throw up the slides, that'd be great. We could take a look at Linus on the set as that character. Let me just
I
advance.
was a little
it.
over on that one.
There you go. There you go. Some stills from Law and Order. What I guess I have to ask you, what was that experience like? I read you felt it was like doing theater again. Being in the courtroom was kind of like being on the stage. You speak to that a little bit?
Well, firstly, I mean, it was just a wonderful gig to get, and I was so grateful that Mr. Sam Waterston wasn't leaving the show, because I think that would have been just too much to ask of anybody to fill his shoes, because he's an iconic character in the franchise. And so it was just amazing that he got to be the DA and I got to work underneath him and learn from him. And he was so beautiful with me. And I loved just going in there every week with a new story and really getting to work it. And then Fridays were my favorite days, because we were in the courtroom and you'd normally shoot on the ADAs first in our direction, and then at the end of the day we'd turn around and start shooting on all the witnesses. But it was like theater in that, it is the courtroom is a little bit like the theater. You're playing to the gallery, you're playing to the jury.
Yeah.
And I suppose and that's my background, is lots and lots of theater. So it was a bit like coming home to that. Yeah.
And since your background is in theater, I imagine it wasn't as daunting for you as it would have been for maybe other actors to have to memorize such long monologues. I mean, some of those courtroom scenes have pages, right? And pages and pages of monologue.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would find that quite hard now, but at the time, I just thrived off it. I loved it. And because the show, was cops and lawyers, it didn't mean that you were every week working every day. So you did get enough prep time, because they'd be out shooting with the cops. And there was a couple of times a year then when they would do tandem, and they would actually shoot 2 episodes at once, and then you were back to back. But yeah, I remember one time Rene Bausa, the writer, he rang me up and he said, "I've written a speech for this summation," and he said, "I want every word in there. So you've got to act like your pants and your hair are on fire." Basically, it was a long summation, which in a real courtroom would go on for like 3 hours or 2 days.
Right.
And he wanted it done in like 5 minutes. And so I remember doing it. But yeah, it was a great challenge. And like Sam said, one of the great privileges of that job is that it was a New York institution for New York actors. So every week there were like amazing actors walking through this revolving door of just constant talent, new people sometimes doing their first job, and you're looking at them going, wow, that kid could be picking up an Oscar anytime soon, to like turning up one day and there's like Mercedes Rule and Deborah Winger and
Fran Lebowitz. Fran Lebowitz would play the judge. I love that. I love when she would guest star as the judge. That was incredible.
It was just outrageous. It was such a privilege, such a privilege.
And something just occurs to me, Linus. You said your dad is in the Guinness Book of World Records because he was in the longest running scripted British show. And isn't Law and Order the longest running scripted American show? Am I mistaken?
That's a bit of a no. You're not, but it's actually gone. It's that we were going to win it with that prize with Law and Order: The Mothership, the original show, which this one was that I was in.
Right.
But it got cancelled, and it's just before it would have reached the Hallmark. I think it was something like what's it? Gunsmoke was the
Gunsmoke. Yes. Yep. You're right.
Okay. But subsequently, SVU has gone on to claim that title.
Yeah,
and now I just rebooted the Law and Order show with my friend Hugh Dancy in that role. So it's kind of got a life. It's good on Dick Wolf. I mean, he's amazing.
For sure. Hugh Dancy's great. I just saw him last night in a movie with Julianne Moore called Savage Beauty, which I hadn't seen before. He was great in it.
Wow.
And staying in television, Of
Oh, look
course,
at that.
you also starred as Egbert of Wessex for several seasons of Vikings, which was
Yeah.
tremendously popular. Did it film? Am I correct in believing it filmed in Ireland? What was production
Yep,
like?
it
Was
was
it
all shot in Wicklow, and so we stayed in South. Most of us stayed in South Dublin and shot there, and it was just what a beautiful part of the world,
Mhm.
and such an amazing experience. I got to basically live there on and off for 3 years,
Mm, wow,
and
that's
with
good.
an amazing group of people, incredible crew that they have there. And it was one of those rare times when you're doing a great show and there's not a lot of producers standing around telling people what to do. It was very relaxed, and it was very Michael Hurst, the creator of the show, is an anomaly in the industry because he writes every single episode. And
Wow,
some seasons we were doing 20 eps. We
wow,
went
it's
through
incredible.
10, 20, and he would write every single episode. And he'd still take you out for dinner, drink a bottle of wine with you, and talk about what could we do with the character and collaborate. So it
He's
was just a kind of creative gift.
Sure. And I mean, that certainly comes across on screen on what ends up on screen because it's a gloriously made show. It's so
It is
incredibly
indeed.
dynamic, and it's so much part of the so-called television golden age right now, where so many of these series are as good as Academy Award winning films. They're just
Mhm.
that dynamic and artistically made. What was
Mm.
it? What did it feel like to be part of something that was so enormously popular? I know Law and Order was as well, but you were with Vikings since the inception.
No, I joined
no,
it.
you can.
I joined it in season 2,
Season two,
and then
okay.
I stayed through till the end of Ragnar, who was the main character's demise. Our characters became connected. I became like his nemesis, and so I stayed through to the end of that arc. Then they carried on with the show. I mean, it's wonderful. I still get people talking about it wherever I go in the world. It's one of those. I mean, I'll say though, it's one of those shows that has been seen everywhere but not recognized. So Game of Thrones got all the glory, as deservedly so.
Sure.
But Vikings didn't win awards. It just got seen everywhere in the world, which was great. So it
Yeah.
sold everywhere and was seen by and it's got a massive fan base.
It does. It does. And,
Yeah.
and very many of them are in my family, so they're very excited to hear that I was interviewing you tonight. Of course, then there's Homeland. You were there for
Yeah.
2 seasons. Is that right?
Well, yeah, 2, and then I tagged on to the end of season 6, and then I joined for 7 and 8. Yeah.
Okay. And that, again, another show with a very devoted following. Can you talk to us about your
Including
experience?
myself.
Yeah.
Including I was actually, I mean, there's a funny story about this. In fact, that picture there with me and Claire in the top,
Claire
that was
Danes,
the
right?
first day of shooting, and I got the offer on a Monday to start shooting on the Wednesday, and they just come up with the idea to
Wow.
add this character in, and they didn't even know what they were going to do with him in the next season. So it was a real like, where am I going with this? And
Wow.
I called it. I had a chat with Alex Ganzer, and I got cold feet at one point because I didn't know if this was really going to work out.
Sure.
But I was watching it on the Sunday, and I got the offer on the Monday. So
That's incredible. So you were a fan that ended up becoming a co-star on the
I
series.
have to say, I had to kind of, sometimes with acting, you have to dispel things to get over humps and stuff. So when I was on the set with Claire, I just had to say, Claire, I'm sorry, I've got to get this out of the way. Such a nerdy fan of the show. It is very weird for me right now.
I'm sure she appreciated it. Yeah.
And she was good. Yeah. And then we could sort of just clear the air and then get on with the scene. And she's a great, amazing scene partner. So it was fabulous. And I loved my time on that show. I mean, I call it the Mercedes of television. I mean, I've never owned a Mercedes, but I have driven one. And they're really nice to drive. Everything just works. They've thought it through, the execution. Everything is kind of just really super classy. It's
smart. Yeah.
They don't smart. It's responsive, and there's no second guessing anything. They're on top of it all. So it was a privilege to be part of it.
Shifting gears now, going back to the 90s and moving into film. Priest is one of my favorite movies of the 90s, and so is The Wings of the Dove. And
Oh.
they both came out around roughly the same time. They were both, I guess, mid 90s.
One was
Early mid 90s.
94, and the other was 96 or 7. Yeah.
And I remember them both leaving an incredible impression on me as I was forming as a writer, a teenage writer at that time. They've endured as classics 30 years on. What are your thoughts when you reflect on them all this time later?
Gosh. Well, I'm very proud of both of them, particularly Priest. The beautiful and amazing Antonia Bird, God rest her soul.
I know.
But that movie, I had no idea it was going to make the mark it was going to make. I just thought it was part of a series then on television called Screen 2, where they were making like £1 million movies, even less, just like a series of 10 a year or something. And you just thought, well, it's just a TV movie. But Antonia, bless her, she was shooting in Super 16, meaning that you could blow it up to 35 mil to project it, so that she had her eye on it being a movie. And I was like, well, I said, no, it's too parochial. It's too much about England. The subject matter's too contained. She said, I don't agree. And God, was she right? Because it leapt out to a wider audience. And I remember getting mail for years and years to come about that one. So I was very proud of that. But then Wings of a Dove was a different story in that I kind of was a bit reticent about doing the film. And when eventually I did it, I felt like I shortchanged it. And I felt a bit like I learned a lesson for myself there that I would never do that again. I should watch the movie again maybe sometime. I'm not very good at watching myself anymore, but I became proud of it later. I was not proud of myself at the time.
Why were you reticent because you were intimidated because it was Henry James and it was a classic?
No. I basically another story for another time, but I basically gave up acting for a couple of years and just got interested in the spiritual dimension of life, started meditating and questioning everything and why am I doing it and what's it all for, and doing that, which is good to do, but it's also dangerous stuff. And I think when I eventually decided that there was nothing wrong with my profession and I loved it and I wanted to re-engage with it, I was a little bit remote from it.
I see.
And I didn't feel like I gave myself. So from that film onwards, I can honestly say that whatever project I've done, however good or bad it has been, I've always given myself 1000%. If it's a student film, a voiceover, I don't care what it is, I'm there 1000%, because I learned on that I was kind of like not really there. Funnily enough, people have said it actually was perfect for the character.
Because he's kind of a little bit aloof and a little bit indifferent, right? And a little bit preoccupied and out to lunch. Yeah, it worked. It worked. It worked beautifully, Linus.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said anything about why that happened. It's really a method approach, I was just trying to get.
No, we know the secret sauce. But getting back to Priest briefly and Antonia's notion of how the specificity of England would and I think this is true of literature and of film and of theater and of art in general. I think that sometimes the more, and Zadie Smith said this one, speaking of English writers, I interviewed her a few years ago. She told me, I think that it's important to be specific about a place because that's what ends up making it universal.
Right.
And I think that was the case here for sure. And talk about like having a cultural impact. I remember reading in magazines and newspapers, everybody was writing editorials about Priest. It was one of the buzziest films of the early 90s, along with like The Crying Game, which came out just maybe 2 years before that.
Yeah. Well, I remember coming to the States and they gave me a bodyguard because there were threats against Disney who were associated with the film, so there was a lot of outcry about it. I mean, look how far we've come since then, for example.
Sure.
Thorny issue. And it's interesting that I just suddenly, as you were saying, I just remembered that when I was offered the role, I didn't audition for it. It just came to me, and it was sort of really odd. And I read it was a very thin script. I mean, Jimmy McGovern, who's a great writer from that part of England, he'd actually written it as a TV series, 6-part TV series, and then just felt it wasn't working. So he just stripped everything out and just brought it down to the essential bones of what it was. And what I read was like a 40, 60 page script that then got sort of developed and worked on, and we went to shoot. And in a way, it was sort of perfect. I remember reading it and just being in tears at the end of it, going, "It's perfect. It's just got the perfect structure in it." You know,
It sure was. And Eve, you could take down the slide. Thank you. How do you choose? You spoke about choosing roles or roles choosing you, or not necessarily seeking a role, but it happening to you. How do you choose your roles? What do you look for in a character or a story? Is it different for every project?
Well, you know, I mean, I'll just be frank and say I'm not actually sort of privileged enough that I'm constantly reading scripts and turning away stuff. And so sometimes the roles choose me. I think, though, I am clear about the things I don't want to do when they come my way. I don't like, and I never did, like even after Priest, and I got a lot of offers there and I had work coming in all over the place. I don't like cynical, nihilistic drama. I'm just, you know, I need humanity. I'm into the humanities. I need a voice, and I love things with moral dilemma. I'm definitely more into drama than comedy, but I love things with complexity, with humanity, and I like now recently just doing things with people who've got a vision, who've got a voice, and they really want to express something. So I'll take a risk on somebody, even if material doesn't seem quite right, and that sometimes they'll let me, you know, give to it and collaborate with them. So each thing is its own little marriage, you know. And I don't necessarily choose between lots of things, but I tend to sometimes find that things do choose me. Things will just come out, and work begets work, and like attracts like. So, you know, I did a couple of movies last year, and they were, I don't know how successful they will be, but one of them particularly very creative process to be in. And
I'm definitely going to ask you about those. You know. And it sounds like there's a level of earnestness too about a project that is attractive to you. You know, to me, I think what's anti-cynicism is like earnestness, right? And sincerity. And yeah. What are your thoughts about method acting? There's been so much talk about that lately.
Well, has there been talk lately? I didn't know. I thought.
Well, especially, I think it was because of the actor from Succession, Jeremy Strong.
Oh, right.
There was a New Yorker article, and it became scandalous because it was like a hit piece apparently, and it became a talking point. Is it? Do you have strong opinions about it?
I mean, I'll be frank. I don't suppose I really honestly know what it is. If you're talking about. My heroes were Brando, Cliff, Dean. So I loved the method actors, and did I apply a Stanislavski approach? Yeah. And would I put myself through stuff to find something? Yeah. But I also don't believe in being a dick on set. So I just, you know, I think in the end, I'm open to whatever gets people there. It's process, and people can have different processes. I believe, and I'm not there yet, but great acting is really about trust. If you have access and trust in yourself as the vehicle, as the expression of the character and the art and the moment, and then I look at actors like Anthony Hopkins and Judi Dench, who they have instant access. They have instant recall. You know, Julianne Moore, I worked with her. She could be talking to you about her kids and then turn and be in the midst of a very painful scene. And it was, to her, it was just access. But, you know, I'll be honest, for me, sometimes I have to focus and I have to think, and I don't like all of the paraphernalia and the social aspects sometimes of being on a set can be very distracting. So when people do things like cut off and be quiet, I don't mind. And I support them in that. In fact, when I did Mandy with Nick Cage, he and I, when we met, we agreed, we had a chat. We were playing arch rival, you know, nemesis to each other, enemies. And we said, let's not talk. Let's not engage on the set. Let's not have any conversation other than when we're on camera. Oh, my God, what a relief.
And, you know,
just to bring the intensity. We would sit next to each other waiting to shoot, and we wouldn't talk to each other. It'd be like 3 o'clock in the morning.
But that creates a kind of tension. It creates a kind of tension that's like really useful for your characters. And Eve, can you throw up the slides again? I want to take a look at some of these stills from Mandy, which I thought was, there you are. Such a tremendous film. It's wild and it's weird, and you're so captivating in it. Of course, it co-stars, as you just said, Nicolas Cage and this year's Best Actress Oscar nominee Andrea Riseborough.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
What do you think of the cult status of the film? Because it very quickly achieved the kind of like midnight movie cult status, and people are really ardent about it.
You know, it's really funny, Brian, but I nearly didn't do this film because when I got sent it, I read it and I just went,
It's bonkers. Yeah.
I had no frame of reference for it. I thought, I just don't, it's not my genre. I don't know what everything is. What is this? It's just nuts, you know? And then my wife said to me, I came out after reading it and I said to her, you know, I don't get it. And she said, well, give it another shot and at least talk to the director and find out. So I did. I remember I had a couple of beers actually, and I read it again. And suddenly I saw another layer inside of it. And I saw the character that he was asking me to consider. And I said, well, if I get on and then I watched his movie, Beyond the Black Rainbow, his first film.
So good. I love that film. Yeah, it's a favorite of mine.
If I talk with Panos Cosmatos, and I don't know who he is, and there's a young kid there going, yeah, man, we're going to I thought, then I'm just going to end the call and say, thanks for your time. But what I found was this incredibly kind, is super smart, super sensitive, super focused human being who has a vision and a big heart. And we just connected. And I started talking to him about what I saw in character as being his white paper on the male ego. It's basically broken down the male ego into like all of its extremes. And he said, yeah, man, that's it. Yeah, man, that's it. And we just connected. And I tell you, it was one of the most creative things I've ever done, being part of that.
And your performance is really courageous and kind of it's so lacking in self-consciousness. You just seem so incredibly free and visceral in it and fluid, and it's really dynamic to watch. And there you are with Nicolas Cage, and is that Panos?
That's Panos, yeah, with his big beard.
Yeah. Shifting gears again and going back a bit to when you played RFK.
This is a kaleidoscope of
this is a kaleidoscope of your life. What was it like to inhabit that character? Because you know you're playing not just a real person, but a person who is you know, pretty iconic and pretty well known in the American consciousness. And he met with an incredibly tragic premature end, of course, as we all know. What was that whole experience like?
Well, you know, without sounding dramatic, it was life-changing. I mean, I knew who Robert Kennedy was, but I didn't really know a lot about him. And this movie just launched me. I love research on anything. I didn't, you know, I understand why Dan Day-Lewis would say, I can't do it wrong unless you give me 2 years to prep for it. Because when you're playing something like this, I had 3 months to prep. It was nowhere near enough, you know. But I read everything I could. I watched everything I could. And I started to just, and it was very overwhelming because it was like one of those films where I was just in every scene and every shot every day and massive amounts of dialogue. And I felt by the end of it, I just was so in awe of who he was. I mean, I had to sort of find a way to own him and be, you know, my expression of him. But I was just so in love with who the man was and what he represented. And the fact that he wasn't the sort of assured leader after Jack died, which was the point of the movie we were making, that it took him a long time to find his voice, to find the courage to stand up and say, I will run. I will run for the good of the country. And it wasn't just some selfish ambition. He actually was a real public servant and a man of conscience. And I have a picture. I'm looking at him right now. He's looking at me. I've kept a picture from one of the advisors of that film, and I keep it with me all the time. So he's one of those people now in my life that is like a touchstone. In fact, just quickly, there's another actor who's played him, and he's trying to get a little documentary together of all the actors that have played Robert Kennedy.
Oh, that's a great idea. I like that.
Sit on a round table, including Martin Sheen and Barry Pepper and the like, to talk about what was it like to play. Because when you step into those shoes, they're so big, you just shake and just hope you can do some justice.
Did you ever receive any kind of feedback from any member of the family on the portrayal?
No, Doris Kearns Goodwin came to the set, and she was very sweet and complimentary. You know,
Of course,
she's
the
a big
tremendous
biographer.
Pulitzer Prize winning historian. She's
Yes, yeah, but no, I never got to meet Ethel, or but I one of the advisors, he knew the family, and I mean, they're not going to watch everything that's
No,
made.
of course. There's so much media about them
No,
and their legacy,
I
but you
think,
definitely did the man justice, I have to say,
well, that's
Linus.
sweet of you.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones where you just feel honored. It sounds. I felt really honored to have had that opportunity, and it's with me forever.
It is, yeah, I'm sure. Okay, if you could take that slide down, thank you so much. I have to ask, you have such a great sense of, I've read other interviews with you, and you have such a great sense of mood and structure and story when you talk about film. Do you have any plans on writing or directing a film?
Oh, yes, I do. My wife and I have written a movie that we really want to get made. It's a passion project of ours, about a French Jesuit priest and a paleontologist who died in 1954, and he basically was exiled by the church for his belief in evolution. And he's what I call a real futurist. He had an enormous vision and faith in the future. And it's a story about his life. It's a biopic, if you like, but I just feel it's incredibly relevant to today, because that man lived through 2 world wars, and he saw some sort of continuity of hope. It's not a spiritual film. It's not a film about religion. It's a film about a man whose vision lives beyond him, and his faith in the future is the most powerful aspect of it. And we've written this. It took us 2.5 years to write it, and it was a humbling process. And unfortunately, it's a very expensive film to make. So it's a slow road, but we're starting on that road and trying to get collaborators on board. So anybody out there wants to fund a movie?
It sounds like a fascinating film. You would want to direct it as well and star in it?
No, I don't want to star in it.
Okay.
I do look like him. It's not a vehicle for me. It's more about, it's about getting, I'd actually like a French actor to play the role. I think we're in times like that where it doesn't really pay to have me doing a French accent. I think we'd like the audience to be French actor playing that role. But there's a great role for, he had this sort of unrequited love affair with American sculptures in Beijing and Peking. And so there's great parts for lots of international cast. But I just think, and there's a hook to the story, which is about this 12-year-old girl who's now still alive in her 80s, who met him in Central Park, and that encounter changed her life forever. So we bookend the movie with this old man who's sort of disillusioned because he was silenced and exiled by the church. Eventually, he made his way back to New York. They wouldn't let him go back to France, and he wasn't allowed to publish. He wasn't allowed to preach. He wasn't allowed to teach. But he walked around Central Park, and he bumped into this young woman, and he kind of changed her life. And so that's how we sort of contain the movie within that relationship, and she's the sort of faith into the future aspect of it. So, and I think we would love to direct it. We don't want to get in the way of it. I think we have a vision for it. It would make a lot of sense for us to direct it, and we're going to pursue that path. If we are inhibitors to the film getting made, then we just have to find someone who gets it and will allow us to work with them.
Well, I mean, good luck, and I'm sure it'll eventually come to fruition. It sounds really compelling and epic, and incredibly timely as well. We'll watch out for it too. So I imagine it'll happen sooner than later. And we're going to take questions for Linus. So please start sending them in if you have any. I still have one question of my own. So you've done so much. You've done British and you've done American. You've done TV and you've done film. You've done theater. You've done big commercial movies like Riddick and Pandemonium and Batman Begins, and you've done smaller, more different, like experimental films like Priest or Mandy or My Policeman. Is there ever really a difference in how you approach any one of your projects, be it TV or film or theater or big budget or small? Is the experience different for you ever?
I more and more I'd say the answer is no. I mean, you know, often the difference in these things is literally the budget, and quite often now on big budget films, supposedly, but they will. You know, I did one with Liam Neeson some years back, and I remember the director saying to me, "Look, I don't have a lot of time." You know, my God, you know, this is a big budget film, but it was like, whatever the budget is, there's always a time limit on shooting stuff, and time is money on film. So quite often it is about come prepared, come ready, can you deliver? But it's a long-winded way of saying I don't think there really is a difference. I still love the medium of the single story of cinema. To me, and however much I have enjoyed, you know, the character arc of doing something like Vikings, which is you don't get to do that on film. To take something and grow. I grew that character till he was an old man and died. You know, what a journey! That's such a great journey.
Yeah.
But I still love, like, for me, the artistry of a single story, you know, working like with our Teilhard film, our film about Teilhard. People have said, why didn't you make a TV series? His life was so epic. And I say, well, because I want people to experience it in one sitting. I want to feel the weight of one lifetime in one sitting. And it's harder to do that as a writer. And as an actor, maybe it's not much different, but you have to be in the hands of good directors who can help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So much of it. We're getting a lot of statements, no questions necessarily. So here's one. Love the beard. Someone else wrote, we miss Linus on the new Law and Order seasons.
Oh, okay.
And here's another. So they want you back on Law and Order. See what you can do.
Okay.
Come on back. I'm a big Batman. I'm a big Batman nerd, and I just wanted to thank you for your performance in Batman Begins. Thomas Wayne has rarely been portrayed in a fully formed way in live action, and your performance really made him a human being and not just a symbol.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I mean, that line that I got, and I had no idea when I said that line, why do we fall down, Bruce, so we could learn to pick ourselves up again? People still quote that back.
Yes, it's so quotable. It's almost 17 years, 18 years later. It's going to be 18 years, right, this summer. And it's still something that comes up in the popular culture on a regular basis. Let's see, something else just came through. Looking forward to yes. So I was going to actually ask you. Thank you, Jeanette. The Dresden Sun. What have you been watching and reading lately? Is the question first. Have you been watching
and reading? Oh, well, actually, right now we are revisiting Happy Valley because there's a new season coming out, and we have watched both seasons, but thought, why don't we recap on season 2 again? So I'm going back to Happy Valley. Reading, I've just on the Panchakarma in India, I read a lot of books, and I was reading a lot of Ken Follett, and I read Pillars of the Earth, which I'd never read, and I loved it. So big fan of his. And just recently, I think Spielberg's just bought the option to these books, the Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. It's a very English, eccentric murder story. So that's a lot of fun, setting an old people's home in England. So my reading's quite varied and wide, but a lot of sci-fi and and TV. I suppose recently that there's that, and I love The Offer. You know, the story of the making of The Godfather.
The Godfather, that was great. That was really great. I loved it. Yeah. So
I've got a few to catch up on now. That's what I'm going to be doing.
Now that you're back to be reading and watching TV shows and movies, I hear you. It's like you have to. It becomes a part-time job just to find time to catch up on books and media. But you did mention the Dresden Sun, and I know that's one of your projects that that's a film that's going to be coming out this year. You also have a series called Fellow Travelers.
Yes, indeed. Now, Fellow Travelers is written actually by Ron Nicewanner, who I met first on Homeland. He wrote the first few episodes, and he was in season 7 that I did. And then he, just by chance, he'd written My Policeman. And after doing My Policeman, Robbie Rogers, who was one of the producers on that, he developed this book from this book called Fellow Travelers, a series for Showtime with Ron, which they pitched with Matt Bomer in the lead. And it's an amazing story of the McCarthy era, but, you know, from the Lavender Scare, from a gay perspective of, you know, as well as looking after the commies that were after homosexuals and that sort of whole oh God, it was such an awful situation. So basically it's like following McCarthyism through a story of a love affair that's happened in that era and into the 80s. Again, another time traveling one.
Sure.
But it was a beautiful thing to be part of, and very proud of what I was there to shoot. Amazing cast of people up in Toronto.
When, that's going to be released this year?
I believe it is. I was just doing some ADR on it the other day, so I think it's going to be in the fall of this year. I think is it 8 episodes, I think?
And, again, this is another project, another film or TV show of yours where you explore LGBTQ themes. And as a member of that community, I just want to thank you for doing this good work. It's meaningful and it has an impact.
I'm just happy to be part of anything that's got a voice and is moving us forward, as part of the conversation, as they say. It's great when art can actually contribute to life and create that discussion.
Yeah, sure. We're doing it for.
Play in that, so I'm grateful to be asked to be part of these things.
We have another question. Thank you again for that, Linus. Thank you for this fascinating Culture Connection program tonight, giving us so much insight into the acting profession. Can you tell us what some of your favorite books are, since it's a library show?
Well, favorite books. I'm looking at funny. I read mostly on Kindle now. I'm a terrible thriller junkie. I love
thrillers. Are great fun.
Sure. It was a new find for me, But I read a little while ago the Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu.
Oh yes, yeah.
Mama's top 10 reading list some years back, and that was probably the most extraordinary sci-fi trilogy I've ever read.
That's also being adapted, I believe, this year.
It is. Yeah, I don't know who's doing it, but I mean, good luck trying to translate that. But yeah, I've become more of a nerdy reader recently, and it's a great. But I find it hard when I'm at home. Funnily enough, like when I'm away, I just sort of devour books, and then when I'm at home, I just find I get into bed, I read a page, and I'm out. So. But it's a great thing, a great thing for the mind, and there's so many writers out there. So yeah, Ken Follett, Pillars of the Earth was a big one for me, because I'd missed it when it came out in the 80s, and then they did a TV series of it. So I was lucky I hadn't seen it, and I read it. I was blown away by that. It's all about 12th century England and how they made cathedrals. Sounds so boring, but it's so epic. That book is so epic.
I will check it out for sure.
Pillars of the Earth.
Pillars of the Earth. We have 2 more. We're going to end it with 2 more comments. Thank you for your humanity. Wow.
Well, I thank you for yours.
I find it so refreshing how you bring such an appreciation and gratitude towards the various projects you've been involved in. Good luck to you and your wife getting your film made.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for that comment, Roseanne. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Linus, so much for this evening, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you, Brian.
Have a safe, wonderful weekend. Be well, everyone. Take care.
Bye.